Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Michael Gisman. Michael, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, excellent, excellent. I'm glad that we could get you on. I've been seeing your books for quite a while, and I know, we've been talking on social media here and there. So, I'm glad that, even with like having to reschedule and stuff, and my son being sick, that we could, have you on the show and, get you into season three. I was really excited when I was looking at your blurbs and I absolutely love both of your covers. Like, as soon as I saw your advertisement, I was like, follow, and I added your books to TBR. I didn't even have to see what they were about. I was like, I just knew that they were my kind of thing. So, I was definitely want to get you on so we could talk about, just your overall aesthetic and, your product. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, we'll start right there with that first question, which was actually given to me by a fan like 2 seasons ago, and I've actually really enjoyed it. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Well, I started writing a little bit in high school, and then just dabbling. Cause I was a big fantasy reader. Obviously, that's what I do is I write fantasy and I read tons of fantasy. All behind me is mostly fantasy. There's some fiction, some historical fiction, so I got a little bit of everything. But my main digs are fantasy world. So in high school, I was reading a lot. So I was always constantly playing around with different things, creating worlds, and I was even drawing maps and doing all kinds of silly
Oh,
things
cool.
when I was in, grade school. I actually started probably in eighth grade. It's probably seventh, eighth grade, sixth grade. I got some books here from there. I was like in sixth and eighth grade. I'd write my names on there in case somebody found my book. I lost it, so I get it back. So back then, I started writing it, but I didn't know anything. Just a 12, 14-year-old, 16-year-old, whatever. And then I went to college and I was taking a introduction to theater course.
Mm.
And it was a big class. It's probably like 70, 80 people in this course.
Oh, wow.
Because it was a general elective course that everyone could take this. So even if you're a mechanical engineer, you could take this course and fill an elective. But anyway, so there was 70, 80 people in there, and she had us all write like a 3-page script for a show or a movie, something like that. So I wrote my 3-page thing, and then she picked three of them to have people come up and act out. Well,
Oh,
mine wasn't picked, but it was out of 78 people. I wasn't shocked. But after she mentioned the three that she's like, okay, these are the three we're gonna do. She's like, there's a fourth one I really want to mention because it's so good. It's a one-person show. And she's like, I wanted something with a bunch of people in it, and that fourth one was mine. And it was kind of cool. And she pulled me off to the side after class and was talking about with me about it. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe I'm not so bad at this thing. I was in high school dreams, maybe trying to write something, and so that was pretty cool. And the unfortunate thing is, I kept that for years and years, and then I moved several times. Somewhere along the way, that script got lost, but
um,
that was one of the things that said, okay, maybe I should start doing this. So then I started writing and coming up with concepts and different things. I kind of always had a general idea in my head. So that's where Defenders of Myth Beginnings kind of started from, is all that.
mm.
I mean, it took me 10 years to write the first book, which isn't too different from a lot of the people. I met Terry Brooks a bunch of years ago at signing.
Oh, cool.
Had all my books signed. I got a whole bunch of books back here signed by
Oh, that's
him.
awesome.
I love his stuff. So I remember talking to him. He's a scientist, so it's very brief, but I did mention that. He's like, "Oh, well, it took me 10 years." And since then I've read where he's talked about that.
Mm.
It took him a while. And some people can write faster than others. Big thing is life gets in the way.
Yeah,
You
amen.
kind of work. Most people have to work first or something especially in the self-publishing world. And
Yeah,
that's really what opened the door too, is this whole self-publishing thing. It's all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't have to go try to find an agent. I can control my own destiny. It's a lot more work, but I kind of like that idea. And I think you're starting to see now with self-publishing that um, we're equal with the trades now. I honestly believe that. Of course, there's some that aren't so good, but I've read some trades that were not good. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
thing during the late '90s, I was reading some stuff and I was like, this isn't enjoyable. And everyone's tastes are different. I get that, um, but because not everyone's gonna like my book. Some people love it, some aren't. I mean, you get both ends. So it's everyone's. As long as it's in your wheelhouse and what you enjoy reading, then I think the indies are just as good as the trades at this point. But anyways, that's a long-winded version of the answer to that question.
Well, I just think it's funny that you mentioned that though, because I do have quite a few books where I remember from traditional published books from fancy or sci-fi where from '90s, um, early 2000s where I'm like, yeah, this is not great. Like,
Yeah,
I always think it's
yeah,
funny. I think it's funny that people they assume if you're traditionally published, your book's just better than indie. And I went to meet a bunch of people. I met Kevin Hearn, Brandon Sanderson, and Patrick Rothfuss right before they became, the big guys. And a bunch of other Brian McKellen was there. There was a bunch of stragglers, and like Michael J. Sullivan was there. Absolutely just hilarious guy. So if you brought me book two, you want to go buy book one and then bring it to me. I was like,
yeah.
you might want to put numbers on them. At the time they didn't have them on the outside, so now I find it funny that they do. I always like to take credit for that. I can't wait to interview him one time and ask him about it. But yeah, it's just funny that they were like, yeah, they actually were the ones to convince me to try indie publishing and to go this route. So for quite a while I'm like, I'm not going to query. I'm like, I just like the community that a lot of the indie published people had. And they're like, oh, go check out so and so's book over there. I did the
Yep,
blurb, and,
yep,
and we just had a great time with each other. I think that was like almost like 9 years ago, when I went and met a bunch of them down in Poison Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was living out there. But yeah, it's like, yeah, and I think you're right though. Like there's so many indie published books, particularly fantasy, where I'm just like, oh, this is amazing, and particularly sci-fi, I think too, where there's like Steve McHugh's one, and there's just like certain people I think have a Mark Cooper is another one, just like have a certain vibe, I guess, where it's kind of nice because I feel like indie publishing can do what you want, and you can write. I think different to the traditional published market. So I think you get a lot better
yeah.
stories, in my opinion, because they're a
That's
lot
it.
different than yeah.
That's the thing for me. It's the stories. It's getting lost in it. And that's I read. I'm an escape reader. I read to escape. There's the world's crazy out there. I follow politics, but I don't get into it. And the last thing I want is to read a book and I just want to escape all of it. So my
Yeah,
books are also that way. It's kind of escapism. Just want to get away from it all. And it's kind of like sitting and watching a good movie too, and you
yeah.
just kind of get lost in it. And I think the indies can do it just as well as the trades, because like I said, they're '90s. I read a few that I didn't get lost in at all. It's just it was not like they were poorly written. It's just the story was just to me was boring. Now again, everyone's different, so it's all good too. That's the thing. I mean, if you look at the trajectory of fantasy over the years, um, it's not just fantasy. It's grimdark. It's this. It's that.
Yep.
There's so many subgenres of fantasy that wasn't around in the '80s and '90s. Not really.
Yeah.
And now there's so many different. And even they're starting to splinter apart.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And even in the if you go into the grimdark world, because I'm online, I see all people talking and all that. Even in the grimdark world, what one person likes may not be what somebody else likes.
Yep.
Um, and that's all a good thing. That's a variety is a good thing. Just need to find what you like and give it a try. And then the nice thing too with the indie community is they all kind of help each other out for the most part, and we're all trying to do the same thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with trying to get your books out there. And there's nothing wrong with making money either. Trying to make some money at it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can either if you're not doing that for the money, then that's fine too. It's all good in my opinion. It's just my 2 cents on it all. I'm just out here, just some dude trying to write some books and trying to get them out there. So, um, what do I know? But yeah, it's been a fun ride. It's been an interesting journey. I'll tell you that. We may, well, I think some of this stuff I can answer probably in the other questions, but it's been
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
ride, learning what's going on and how to do this, the whole process, not just the writing, and that's a big process too. I mean, I'm constantly learning um, how to write a better book, and I think you need to do that. I think everybody does. I don't care if your Terry Brooks has been around for forever. No offense, Mr. Brooks, but he's written a lot of books. He's been around for a while, and
Yeah,
he's been successful. I don't care what you say about it. If you like his books, I've got a good friend who doesn't really care for his books, and that's all right, you know. But deny that he has appealed to a big chunk of people. But you know, I imagine he is still learning best practice, and I think some of that changes too because people change. People have changed over the years, and how the English language has changed. I mean, look at how the
yeah,
English language has changed. You know, I've got some books from the late 1800s. You go back and read those. Go read Ivanhoe. All right,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
slog
I got a
for you.
copy of that. Yeah.
I enjoyed the book, but man, let's talk about old English, or
Yep.
even Tom Sawyer. Go and read
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Just pay attention to the English language of it, and that is, you know, we have changed a lot,
Yep.
especially the old Pulp Fiction stuff. Uh, you know, John Carpenter from Bars.
Oh man, I love that series.
I mean, you go and read this. I mean, that's you know, they were being paid by the word, so they were awfully
Yep.
wordy and not very
Yep.
you know. You know, it's also got very long too because they got paid by the word. So the English language has changed very constantly, you know, growing and developing. You know.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I remember like reading like Journey to the Center of the Earth and why I liked the book. It was like the English was just you could just tell it was written for the time period and
Yeah.
20,000 Leagues. I think a lot of
Oh
Jules
yeah.
Verne is like
I
that,
love
you know.
Jules Verne. I
The
love
Time
Jules Verne.
Machine, Invisible Man, you know, H.G.
Yep.
Wells, like yeah.
Yep. I love it all, but you know, I've got to be in the right mindset to read it. To be honest,
Yep,
because whew,
totally.
it can be a slog to get through it.
Yep.
But I mean that in a good way. I shouldn't quite say it that way because I really enjoy those books. But like I said, I do have to be in the right mood because you've got to. It takes them 3 paragraphs to say what we say in 2 sentences.
Yeah.
And you know, heck, now with emojis, I won't be surprised if 10, 15 years from now you'll see emojis in the middle of novels. I
Yeah.
mean, it's everything's getting condensed down. It's like, okay, it used to take this long to write you know, a paragraph. Now it takes
Yep.
this much. You know,
Yeah.
so all that's all part of it too. But being in the self-publishing world, the other side of that is you got to figure out marketing and advertising. You know, formatting the books, and you know, for Kindle in particular. Now they're allowing ebook, EPUB, but before when the first book that I put out, they couldn't. I couldn't put it in EPUB and publish through Kindle.
Oh, interesting.
So you know, now they're letting me do that. So now I can do it across the board. EPUB can be used for everywhere. But first you had to use Kindle's proprietary software. So it's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
yeah, you know. Then I guess I changed it like 9 months after I published, but say,
It's definitely a learning game. I have another author that was helping me with like our new banner and he had it totally right. And then my new laptop's like changing the download. He's like, oh, what's going on? So my friend changes it again, my tech guy, and um it then we get it set. So they both ask, like, are you good? I go, yep, and I get it up there, and then YouTube goes, nope, now you need this. And I'm like,
yep.
you just asked for this pixelation, you know. So even stuff like that, you know, just to, you know, get some of those, it's like the amount of things I've had to learn, you know, just for this podcast, but just like other things too, you know. It's just I always tell people like don't go into indie publishing unless you want to learn a whole bunch of new things. You
Oh
know, like
yeah, outside
yeah, it's
writing, all
interesting.
kinds of new stuff outside of writing, all the technology.
Exactly. Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, that this first book in particular was a big, you know, learning steep learning curve with all that. You know, I had friends, yeah, well, how's the book going? I'm like, well, it's done, but I mean, I'm dealing with all the formatting issues and everything
Other
else. I
stuff.
had to go to, you know, I had to relearn how to use Word a little bit because Word and then EPUB or Word and Kindle, you know, it's just so I had to like
Yeah.
redo how I use Word now,
Yep.
specifically for publishing, which is slightly different than the way I used to use it. You know, I'm not the youngest guy in the world, not the oldest guy, but I'm not the youngest guy in the world. So I've been using Word for a long time. So I was kind of set in my ways. I had to change
Yep.
how I do that, um, and that's all part of it. And then you know, uploading it. You know, I know one time I had the wrong one uploaded, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
somebody said, "Hey, there's something wrong with the book." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, well, it's the wrong file." Because
Yeah.
I save everything. I'm kind of anal about that. Every once in a while on Twitter, I'll see some author go, "Oh, I lost everything." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't lose anything. I write for an hour. I've saved it twice already. I mean,
Oh,
if I write 100 words, I've got it saved, backed up online on a backup server online in the cloud. I've got it also on a separate hard drive on my computer. I mean, it's everywhere." Because I'm like, I have learned my lesson a long time ago. I'm like, you just got to back it all up. but the problem with that is that I've got a lot of files, and sometimes it gets a little messy. Which files? Okay, which one's the one I'm supposed to? Which one am I supposed to upload? So,
It's at me
that's kind of
twice.
fun.
Once with my first fantasy book that I'm finishing, and then with like one of the rough drafts that my favorite fantasy novella, like a prequel novella, I lost. Like it was done, and my rough draft was done. I was going to send it out to alpha readers, and then next thing I know, I'm going through, and I'm like, why am I missing like 3,500 words? So I just haven't had time to go back and fix it, to be honest.
Yeah,
And then I came up with like a better idea, but I was just like, I was like,
yeah.
that really stinks. And I must have, like I think I emailed it to myself, and I must have deleted the email or something that wasn't in my trash. I was just like, oh, that's why now I just do everything on I do everything on OneDrive, with Word, and then I'll actually also just send myself a copy. I'll just make a Google Doc. I just have them both open, so I have it on a drive, and then I just share it. So I have like three different areas
Yep,
that it's
yep,
on.
yep.
That
I
way I
learned
don't do
the
whatever.
hard
But
way, and I
yep,
back everything up now. I just back it all up, and um, you know, I don't even want to lose 100 words. It's too much work with everything else going on. And if I cut the 100 words, that's a whole different ball game. That's to make
yeah,
the
yeah,
product
yeah.
better. But if
So
it's accidental, it's like, well, what did I just lose? Did I just lose this big gem, or did I lose junk? I
yep,
don't know. I want to be able to make that decision, or have my beta readers make that decision, or my editor make that
totally.
decision. Not an accidental oops. I
Yeah, yeah.
lose, you know.
I
So
knew a lady, she was trying to get, yeah, like she lost 65,000 words out of her novel.
oh
And it was like, she was like, oh, I'm done 75 or 79,000. And she was
oh
just like, she was like, formatting or doing something, formatting the word. And it just literally, it just glitched. And then her computer just like died. And she's like, I didn't do it on OneDrive. I'm like, we're all like trying to help her, in a forum. My heart just broke. I was like, oh my
that's
gosh. It made me feel better about losing 3,700 words or, roundabout, but I felt horrible. She ended up doing a lot better, I think, with the next draft because she was driven. But like a lot of people would stop after that. So
yeah. I
um,
mean, I'm not the fastest writer. I will admit to that.
a lot of words.
Yeah, that's a lot of words for me. That's a couple months worth of work because I'm not the
Yep.
fastest writer.
Yeah, it's
Some
crazy.
people are. Some people are very fast. Some are not. I'm not. I think. The thing is, when I write, so I get on these forums and I see some people who like they ask a question. Well, do you write so much then you cut it back, right? They'll write 100,000 words and end up using 50,000. Or are you the type that writes 50,000 and then you go back through and the editing process end up adding 25,000? I'm more that kind of guy. But I kind of have to go back through it and then kind of start fleshing it out more, the story.
Mm.
Um, but I'm still not the fastest writer, so 60,000 words would be a bad cost.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking like with my son, I'm like, I love him, but like just I'm like surprised that we've already gotten through this much of the interview because usually after 30 minutes in the morning, he's like, where's dad? But like writing lately is it's been really difficult. So if I can get 200 words down, while he's sleeping or something, I mean, that's like a really successful day. And yeah, so yeah, like nowadays it's like for me, like 60,000 before wouldn't be, it'd be like really quick. But now it's like that's like, could be a whole year's worth of work. So yeah, I've been like very anal retentive about it now, just like save, 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 making sure I get everything situated. But yeah. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, I think it also depends on your genre too. Like some genres it's a lot easier. I mean, I think well, actually I don't want to go too far. So I'll actually say this after this next question. So what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
Fantasy. I mean, because I grew up in it. Like I said, that's been my bread and butter since I was in grade school. Um, Now I've got an idea for books farther down the line that would be more sci-fi slash fantasy.
Oh,
Because
cool.
I have read some fantasy, some science fiction over the years, but mostly it's fantasy and historical fiction. I love that. But I won't write in that because I don't know. I love history, but I don't feel like I'm that deep in that particular history
It's a
that
lot of work.
yeah, to be a historical fiction, you got to really know your stuff.
Yeah.
There's some people that Colleen McCollum writes some great stuff
Oh,
about. She's great. I've got they're back here somewhere. And then Jack White. Uh,
mm.
And that's for those who like fantasy. I would check out Jack White's stuff. WYA WHY. Uh, no, who's the first? That's it. I would check him out. Jack
Oh
White,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I have a
singing.
couple of those. I think I have that somewhere.
Yeah, they're really good. They're written first person. They're historical fiction about Camelot.
Oh,
They're so it's like the first couple of books are like the great grandfather of Arthur and Merlin. Those are the first couple books. So by the time you get into our actual Arthur and Merlin, it's like you're in the third book. And like Merlin, I don't want to give too much away on it, but Merlin is there's no actual fantasy. Like Merlin, everyone thinks of him as a sorcerer, right? Well, he's seen as a sorcerer in those books by the people living there, but he doesn't actually do any sorcery. It's all through chemistry and
oh, that's
physics
cool.
and stuff like that. So it's really cool how he works all that in. And the first two books, for me, what I enjoy about it is the fall of the Roman Empire. And as the
Mm.
Roman Empire was pulling back from Britain, Great Britannica, Britannia, something like that is how
Yeah.
it used to be called there at times. So for me, I love that the first two books is because it's the fall back of the Roman Empire and the great grandfather of uh, Arthur is a Roman legionnaire. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
that's cool.
up in rank, but he's high in rank, so he's got some land there. Kind of that's how it all kind of starts. So I love historical fiction too, along with fantasy. I think they two kind of dovetail. I mean, they really do because look, most
Yeah.
fantasy, there's so much of that. It's like my stuff is about myths, right? I know there's a question about my book later on, so I won't get too into it, but that all flows into it. You have all this mythology from all over the world. That is the basis of so much fantasy. And a lot of that's all based on history too. I mean, it's all part myths. You can't discount mythology in people's histories. During the Greeks, the Romans, especially in the West, because I know more Western, so that's I know more of the Western myths and histories. So, um, but even in Asian cultures, I mean, myths have played a big role throughout all of history. So I think there's a definite some correlation between all of that in the fantasy world. There's always been kind of a tie there, I felt. I think it's kind of a natural thing. So it's kind of
Yeah,
where I
totally.
was. But yeah, so primarily I'm in the fantasy. That's what I write. It's pretty pure fantasy, pure epic fantasy. I call it an epic fantasy adventure. Um, it's yeah. I had someone say, I think it was an Amazon review said, yeah, they bought the book for vacation and um, they got lost in it and great job and gone to book number two. For me, that was like, yeah, I was like, okay, they got lost in it, they had a great time, and then that's it. That's what I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to solve. I'm not Tolstoy. You're not trying to solve the world's problems. I want people to have a good time and enjoy it, and hopefully it's deep enough that it'll reach a lot of different people. Because there's a little bit of bizarre reasons. Well, we'll get to that. I guess we'll get to that question. But yeah, I primarily write fantasy.
I just think it's interesting, like with fantasy and epic fantasy in particular, and I've talked to quite a few epic fantasy authors and grimdark authors and just different types of fantasy, authors. And I do think that, when like we were talking about previous question, in terms of writing and word count and things like that, I tend to find that epic fantasy feel like, because it's epic and because of the scope and because of, the reader expectation, and different things. I just tend to find that and word count, is a certain word count tends to be expected for each genre or subgenre, right? But I just tend to find that, epic fantasy, writers, authors who focus on it, just you know, tend to, like even like I know a few people like I definitely know that Brian McKellen, pumps out pretty consistent word counts. Brian Stabley, I've heard him talk a lot. I know he does that as well, and very, very chunky, like epic fantasy. But I always just find it interesting based off of, like what people write, because I definitely think your word count too, like per day and stuff. I kind of like the typical like Forgotten Realms type of like
Yeah,
just the dime store books, you know what I mean? So for me,
yeah,
it's like, getting 2,000 words in a day, is actually quite a bit, for those, size books. So I do think epic fantasy, you're talking about two of my books is could be not even one of somebody's, could be,
Yeah.
just
Well,
two-thirds of one.
mine aren't super lengthy. I'm not, 600 page long. I'm not
Mm.
Robert Jordan or George Martin. I mean, those guys write some books, and there's a lot of words in those books. And yeah, mine is Forgotten Realms, Salvatore, that type of stuff. Mine is
Mm.
kind of between that. If you like that, you're gonna like my books, I think. It's fun adventure, epic adventure. But it also leans a little bit towards the other stuff. When I saw Terry Brooks that time, he was talking. Somebody asked him a question, something along these lines. Even amongst epic fantasy readers, you have some people who want all the detail. They want every little thing. So, like look at Robert Jordan. Great books. But some people don't like it because he gets so deep into stuff, and
Yeah.
people talk about she's constantly pulling her braids or messing with her skirts, and I see that online. People talk about that, but other people kind of like that. They love all the detail. They'll go into 2 paragraphs on this embroidered, bed sheet that's on the bed. And some
Or
people like
arrow
that,
making.
some don't. Some like,
Yeah.
some don't. And I think that's the only thing is as readers, we got to just understand that you may love it, but other people may not. It's everyone's cup of tea, or whatever everyone's cup of tea is. But yeah, mine are not super lengthy. I mean, I don't. I'm kind of, like I said, in between all that, more towards what Terry Brooks said is how he does it. He's like, I give you just enough and let your imagination run with the rest.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I try to give you just enough, the setting or whatever it is, and then let your mind run with it. But if you need to have every single little detail, you're not going to get. Yeah, that's when it starts getting wordy. You can have the same story, and it could be 100,000 words, or same story be 300,000 words, just because of
Yeah.
that alone.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and for me, I like both. It depends on my mood. Or sometimes I want just that's from the other times. Like, okay, I want to get deep into it. Yeah, I want to hear every little thing. I don't generally tend towards that way as a reader, but I like both. So my books are kind of, I would say, kind of in between those. But that's for the readers to judge. I write what I know and what I like. The old saying used to be write what you know. Well, yeah, I understand that to a point, and but that's kind of what I do anyway. It's just kind of naturally. I'm like, I'm gonna write what I hope other people like. I'm just writing fun stuff that I would enjoy. And I go back and read the first book because it's weird once you start. I'm on my third book now, and you go back and reread the first book, and it's like, whoa. I think I kind of have to do that. So I'll go back and I'll reread the first and second book. Plus, it'll help me keep going with the third, with the storyline and everything else, even though I have a good idea of it. You kind of forget. I remember someone was asking Terry Brooks again at that thing, Sword of Shannars. I'm not even going to try to say the word right because I know he's specifically saying it. It's not how I've said it all these years, but his first book, the Sword book, he doesn't remember it very well, and he admitted
Mm.
to it. I mean, he wrote that 1977. I mean, man,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a few decades ago.
yeah.
For him to remember it, and I'm sitting there going reread my first book I wrote 2 years ago, and I'm like, whoa, it's like, okay, yeah, I remember it in general, but not every little scene, every little word like you
Yeah,
do when you
yeah,
just publish a book. Then it's like, first 6 months after you published it, it's like everything in it. But then when you start getting into the next book, well, all of a sudden that starts fading. And now I'm finding on the third book, it's like the first book really is like, but, and that's why I did reread the first and second book too, because I had a suspicion of that. So before I start writing the third book, so I want to make sure the storyline still, even though I have a general storyline for the whole series, I need to make sure that, I'm consistent with everything. There's no plot holes or anything else. Although, my beta readers will probably pick that out for me, but you never know. You don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. As to say, it's like somebody, when you, that's like, I can't remember who was listening to. It was like, all right, Salvatore, one of them, I think Bob, I think it was Bob, and he's like, yeah, I just do not remember that. Because, you think about Dark Elf trilogy, Icewind Dale, like that same thing is like early 70s or,
Yeah,
whatever.
like
It's a long time ago.
that was ancient history for him. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
if he went back and unless he actually has reread it recently, if he went back and reread it right now, it'll probably be like a brand new story for him. Be like, wow,
yeah.
this is fun. I'm liking this. Who wrote
Like I
this?
wrote this.
You know. I mean, I could totally see that. I'm only, only got two books written. And I'm, halfway through the third. So, it's just like I can't even imagine having that many books. And he has been prolific. Uh,
Yep.
so to I haven't kept up with them all. I haven't, especially now. I can't read as much. I'm writing more than I'm reading, which
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess that's a good thing. But I don't read as much now that I'm devoting full time to writing. Um, I'm still reading quite a bit, but not nearly as much as I used to.
yeah,
So I think part of that's just, you write so much and you're doing all that all day long. It's like you want to sit down and read a book.
yeah,
I still do, but I won't read as long. I guess that's probably
yeah,
part of it.
totally.
I need a break from all of it, but you know, it takes over your world after a little while. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's your wife and your life kind of gets like, all right, you got to pull them back out of that fantasy world, get back to the world. I don't want to fight. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to go back, but you do. It's so.
Totally true. Well, we'll get to that third one, which is always my favorite question. What are your defenders of myth books about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Well, the how I came up with it is just like I said earlier, all those years of just kind of doodling, fiddling around, coming up with different ideas and stuff. And again, talk about historical fiction. So, defenders of myths, yeah, there's myths in this. And how do I explain it without giving everything away? Because it's like I in my books too, I kind of dole things out as you go along. So I don't bombard you in the beginning with all the details of the main character Kalen's life, But farther on, even in the first book, farther on, you start finding out more and more about his life. I didn't want to just stink it all in there at the beginning. So I kind of dole it out through the story and let the story lead the person, not just through the story and the plot, but also through his life and also his past life. Not that there's any flashbacks. I don't do any flashbacks, but he meets people and stuff that were part of his former life
Mm.
that he leaves from the very beginning. But the myths, they're from here. They're from our world. I'll give that out. So it's like it's all even though this world is not Earth that they're on. It's not sci-fi. Don't think of it that way. Just when you first read it, you're like, okay, this is a typical fantasy world. But then slowly it's like, wait a minute, these creatures, there's pains and goat leg pains, and other cyclops, it's like these things are in there. It's like, well, okay, well, it's a typical fantasy world. They're just using. Well, no, it's not just the fact that you can have a fantasy world. You talk about Salvatore Brooks, or even they have well, not so much Brooks. Wait a minute, he does his own thing with that, but um, it's not like Forgotten Worlds where it's like, okay, it's this world and they just happen to use those creatures. Well, no, these creatures are actually tied to our world, and the whole magic system is tied to our world, even though it's happening in this other world. This other world knows nothing about us. Um, and you'll slowly start to see the meshing of the two, and these myths and all this and stuff are coming alive in their world. Why is that happening? What's happening? Why are they suddenly coming alive? Not just their own myths they've had, this culture, this world, every world, every culture develops their own myths. So you've got their own kind of coming alive. Like, okay, what's bringing them, bubbling them up to the surface? There's also these other ones coming in from somewhere that they've never heard of. These weird creatures and stuff going on. So all of a sudden, it's invading into their world. It's like, okay, what's going on here? So it's a whole journey of trying to find that out. And Kaylin and Hale, his sister, their brother and sister, they were separated at birth. So eventually they have to end up working together. And why were they picked? To what's going on with that? What is their destiny? How does that look? So all of that, the first book kind of opens all that up and gives you a picture of all that, gets them together. And of course, there's an ending to the first book, but it leaves open for the second book. And the second book then continues on to that. And he's got a full cast of characters that kind of come with them then on this journey. Um, and they meet all kinds of other people. Because, like I said, it's an adventure, it's a journey. It's not just sitting in one castle, with politics and all this stuff. There is some politics. There's battles and big fights. There's a couple. First book's got a couple of really there's a couple armies go at it. And Kalen's guess they're separated at that point, but they both end up getting involved in it. So that's that kind of the basics of the books. Like I said, it's always hard to answer that without giving it away. But I found that I've been too, especially early on, I was too standoffish about giving details out. It's like writing the blurbs for it. It's like, well, what do I write without giving away everything?
Yeah,
But I found that's like, all right, I got to open up and not be so stingy on what it's about, be so worried about what other people what you're giving away. So that's basics for the books, and and my reading fantasy over all these years, reading about myths and all this other stuff, was all I enjoyed all that. So I put all that into a book. I don't know if you ever read any books by Elizabeth Boyer. She's an older, I don't think she's no longer with us, R.I.P. But she used to write some stuff about North mythology.
yeah.
Elizabeth Boyer, she was some great stuff. I always like to recommend her too. If you like dark elves, she was one of the first people to write about that stuff. I'll tell you. And she's got some of that stuff too. The worlds combining, and but that happens more on this world. So
Mm.
think more Fae. Earl before Fae became a thing, she was doing it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, she's got great stuff. The Sword and the Satchel. That's the book I would recommend starting with. Sword and Satchel. In fact, it might be the first one of that series. But again, it's old school. It's old school. It's got old school sensibilities and old school writing from the 70s and 80s. So yeah, I find that some people are starting to bash all that stuff a little bit, but it is what it is. It's a product of its time.
Yeah.
Tells
It's
a
like
good
David
story.
Eddings. There's certain things with David Eddings. Like I thought the books were great, and my friend's like, well, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt, like it's a fantasy world, and not take our world views or whatever, or whatever into it, and just like kind of read it, and I could see both, both points of view,
I can see both. I can too with David Eddings too. I can see that.
Yep.
But you gotta take it for what it is, and just again, I read for the enjoyment. I'm not gonna get too deep into all that when I read.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just taking today's sensibilities for me. That's not what I'm gonna do. I just want a good story and just enjoy the ride. Because if you start doing that, then next thing you know, you're gonna dislike Mark Twain. I mean, really,
Yep.
if you start going down that road, then you're going to start getting rid of a lot of the
Yep.
foundations for all of today's work. Going back to
No, yeah,
Mark
yeah,
Twain, go back even farther. You're going to start getting rid of all of that because those sensibilities were a lot different even in the 1800s. I mean,
yeah,
you're talking, some serious differences in cultures and stuff. And where do you end with all that? So I don't
yeah,
go down any of that road. I just read for the enjoyment. I
yeah, yeah,
do understand why people have certain feelings about certain stuff. I get that. Um, there's nothing wrong with that. Just for me as a reader, I try to usually put all that aside. Now there's some stuff, okay, goes a little too much for me, but you know.
yeah,
But for the most part, and yeah, David Eddings I know has come up a couple of times with that type of thing but I think he also because even for the times, some of the relationships were very, I would say, almost archaic. And I think
yeah,
that
yeah,
was on purpose with him. Um,
yeah,
I think that was done on purpose, but I can get why some people might not like it. It's all good. Whatever
yeah,
floats people's boats. And if you're not comfortable with it, don't read it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the other thing too. Is I get it. You don't want to be uncomfortable reading. So don't read stuff you're not comfortable with. Um, so it's all good.
Well, how many? I was just curious. So do you plan on 3 books, or do you plan on more than
I
that,
think
or
at this point it's gonna be 4 books,
4 books? Got it.
possibly a fifth book.
Oh, okay.
But I think at this point it's gonna be 4 books. It's just I will say, I mean, I haven't at this point it's gonna be 4 books, but I can't definitively say that. I would say it's 90% sure. I'm gonna try to get it so it's the 4 books. Um, but as you're writing, sometimes things crop up and things
Yeah,
happen. And you talk about word count, and this word count gets involved and everything else. So it's like, speaking of David Eddings, I was reading an article about him a while back because I read everything about all this stuff, and they were talking about in the publishing world. His books, he wanted to be a trilogy, and the first books are 5, and he wanted it to be a trilogy. And the guys at Del Rey were like, no. That's not how this works. It's not how publishing works. We're gonna have to split this into five books. So that's all. Now I don't think it's as bad today because look at Robert Jordan.
Yeah,
Look at these guys. I mean, these books are they're doorstops. I mean,
yeah,
these
yeah. You kill
humongous
someone with one of
books.
Brandon's hardcovers.
Yeah. Oh, I got one here. Tad Williams, the
Oh, yep,
215
yep, Tad,
Greyhound.
yep,
Yeah, in the
yep.
third book, it's over 1,000 pages. The thing is huge.
Yeah,
Just one
yeah,
book. Now they did when they did the soft cover version, the trade soft cover, they put it in the two books. But I've got the original hardcover, and when I got
oh,
that thing, I was like, holy cow! Okay, this will take me a couple days to read.
yeah, yeah.
It was awesome. I mean, Tad Williams got some great stuff. I mean, the Dragon Bone Chair, that trilogy is, I consider it a staple. It's up there with all those other great guys.
I've been waiting on that one because my buddy and I are doing Epic Fantasy Book Club. So we're almost done with the Cripple. We're like probably one third the way done with the Cripple of God. And then I think we're gonna go do Way of Kings, and just like that trilogy. And then I think we're going to do Tad Williams. We talked about doing somebody else, I forget, but was like still voting. But I told him I was like, if you're not gonna do that, I was like, I might have to just start without you. Because I've been waiting a while on that. It's just taking
Have
us
you
a long
have you
time
have you
to
ever
get through
have you ever read
the Malazan. But
have you ever read Ted Williams, Dragon Bone
no,
Chair?
no, I started the Drag Bone Chair 7 years ago when I first moved here to New York State. I just happened to get it for free actually, like in a really cool one of the original like paperback copies, with like the really cool print and everything with him like looking at the chair and stuff. Yeah, but I started it and then I never finished it. I think I got to maybe
It
like
can be a little wordy too, but it's good.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, you're talking 1,000 pages. The third book was 1,000 pages, so it can
yeah,
be a little. I wouldn't say wordy. That's the wrong way. It's just it's detailed.
yeah.
Um,
Descriptive, I think is what my friend was saying. Yeah,
yeah, that'd be the better way to put it. But it's good. For a guy that also loves R.A. Salvatore, who's not that way, uh, I love. That's what I said. I love both. So I love all of that. There's not a whole lot
yeah.
I don't enjoy. I just, when it comes to that type of stuff, I just got to be in the right mood. Same thing with historical fiction. Sometimes I just want to read historical fiction, or sometimes I want to read pure fiction. I'll sit and read the history book. So it all depends on that. But so
No, that's fair. So I was curious just because, you mentioned, well, reading your blurb and everything and these different myths and mythological creatures. I was curious at which creature you would be most afraid to fight from your books and why.
hmm. Well, there's a couple of bad ones, bad guys in there, bad creatures that they encounter in the two books. Um, but I'll tell you that the ones I would be most worried about they're actually good good ladies, I should say. Are the witches.
Mm,
They they and they the witches play a fairly vital role throughout the journey, especially of the sister Howland. But those three ladies, you know, they first introduced them. She's sitting there over a pot, big boiling pot on this tripod in this wood scene, and I wanted to go old school with it. That's why I went with that. I was like, I'm going to go old school with
that's
this.
cool.
It's probably been done, but that's the way I want. And so Kaylin comes up on this camp when there's this little old lady sitting there, and think of the old type of old school witch crone, and she's
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
there, got a bubbling pot that she's stirring over, and all three of them are kind of grumpy. And I would say I really enjoy those characters because I can be kind of grumpy too. I guess maybe that's why. But those ladies, I wouldn't mess with them. I would not. You can tell. Even in my first description introducing them, that they ooze power. They are
Mm.
strong, tough ladies. They've been around. They're 100 years old. They've been around for the block. So yeah, I would say those three may be some of my most. Um, there's other ones that are scarier in general, but I think overall atmospherically scary and just someone you would not want to mess with. It would be those three ladies,
Oh, that's a
three
good one.
witches. Um, there's a couple other ones too, but yeah, those three. Yeah, I wouldn't mess with them.
Well, what would be which one of your characters would you want to go on an adventure with and why?
Oh, LaQuintus definitely
Hmm.
kind of becomes like the second mentor for Kalen. He's
Oh,
definitely,
cool.
and you'll know right off the bat because I've had other readers talk about him. Everyone likes him. He's kind of a ladies' man. He's a little bit of swashbuckling, the old school swashbuckling type of guy.
Cool.
But he's also the mentor for Kalen. Gets him into a lot of, gets him into some trouble. But also always teaches them the right path and everything else. Yeah, he'd definitely be the most fun one to hang out with, especially if you're looking to go really have a good time. Um, yeah, he's definitely the one. Uh, Especially when I was younger, really have a good time with, have some fun.
That's cool. As like Robert Jordan, I always want to hang out with Lan. Just I was like, give me a sword lesson for like 5 minutes. Like
Yeah,
I would be
yeah,
like
yeah,
totally
yeah,
content after that.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I definitely, and he's a good swordsman too, and he's got even the mustache and everything
Oh,
else.
cool.
I really went old school with him. Um, so yeah, I think he'd be one of the most fun guys. He reminds me. I go to Renaissance festivals quite a bit, and there's one up in New York. Um, it's the first time I ever met this duo, Don Juan and Miguel.
Hmm.
You can look them up online. Don Juan and Miguel. They do a lot of stuff at Renaissance festivals, and the one down here, in North Carolina. I live in South Carolina, but I go to the one in North Carolina. And Miguel, uh, no, Don Juan. Don Juan. If you see him, think you could think of this character.
That's cool.
I've seen this guy for 25 years at all these same Renaissance festivals, and they're great at the Renaissance. They're so personable. They're roaming around. You just stop and talk to them. And I've talked to both of them a lot over the years, and yeah, so you can look up Don Juan and Miguel and see Don Juan. And you'll see kind of where the image that I kind of have
Oh, that's cool.
Quintus. But yeah, Don Juan and Miguel are cool. They're heavily into the Renaissance Festival. So if anyone out there ever goes Renaissance festivals, look those guys up or ask about them. I know they're not so much the one in New York anymore. Um, Sterling Renaissance Festival, that was the one in New York.
Mm.
They are heavily involved in the one down here in North Carolina, Carolina Renaissance Festival, and I know they're heavily involved in several other ones. They helped really. I go off topic too much on the Renaissance Festival, but it's all fantasy. It's all tied into what I enjoy. So
I'd say my so I talked to Aaron Renato and that's what she does is she just goes to Renaissance festivals. She's like, I do way better selling my books at Renaissance festivals than Comic Cons, and I'm like, you know what? And she gave me
yeah,
that
yeah,
idea, and I'm
yeah,
like, I'm gonna go with that. We have one here and right outside of Rochester, or north of Syracuse. There's like two, and then one outside of Rochester on the
I think
western side of the state.
one of those might be the Sterling Renaissance Festival.
I think it is. Yeah, I'm trying to
I
think. I
used to
like
live
just
in
looked them up the
Rochester.
other day.
I used to
Yeah,
live
yeah.
used to live in
Oh, okay.
Fair
Oh,
Park,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right outside of
Yeah.
Rochester.
Oh, that's cool. So I just want to make sure we get this one in before our last question because I absolutely love your covers. I used to teach design. I used to want to be a digital illustrator and everything. There just weren't a lot of programs at that time where I was at in Michigan. But I was just curious, like, who does your covers and how you decide what would be featured on them. Got some great scenes on there.
Yeah, Alan Morris,
Hmm.
awesome guy, great guy to work with, um, and he does fantastic work. Alan Morris. Now, how I got in touch with him is I was looking for kind of that little bit of old school, but also very. Um, I wanted an actual painting. That's what I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
looking for, painting. Aside from the whole AI stuff, because this is before AI started taking over. We can sit here and
Mhm.
talk to death. We don't have time. So, but it's not AI. I'll say that. Alan Morris paints his own stuff. Um,
Oh, you could tell.
but yeah, Alan Morris is great. How I got in touch with him is because I follow a lot of stuff with Grim Oak Press. If anyone's familiar
Oh,
with Grim
yeah,
Oak
yeah,
Press,
yeah.
I'm sure you are. But if you want to find specialty books, David Eddings, Raymond Feast, Terry Brooks, the guy that runs Grim Oak Press is the web wizard and web druid for Terry Brooks and his close friend Terry Brooks, Sean Speakman. Those guys have got great books. I can always recommend them. I've got several of their books here. They do specialty editions of them, and for the David Eddings books, Alan Morse did the artwork, and I
Oh,
was
cool.
like, wow, especially that first book. I was like, what I need to, that's what I want. That's who I got to find. So I hunted him down. In fact, I think I reached out to Sean. Um, I can't remember how I got Alan Morse's contact information a couple of years ago now. But yeah, he does great work, Alan Morse, and he does other paintings, just fantasy stuff. So I would recommend go and look at his webpage, look at his stuff. He's got some awesome stuff that he sells. He also sells the bigger versions of the covers that he does. Because he does a lot more than just the David Eddings stuff for Grimlock. He does stuff for, I think he's also doing Magic the Gathering now too. I think he's doing some stuff for Magic,
Oh,
the
cool.
card game. I think he's working on some stuff for them now too. So he does a lot of great work. And so the first book, yeah, how do I get seen? I had no idea. I'm like, how do I do this? This is another thing I had to learn. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm supposed to pick a scene. I don't know. Like Alan, what do I do? He's like, oh, I'll put up some stuff together. So he sent me like three or four little ones and said, what do you think of this? Just thumbnails, very rough thumbnails. And so my wife and I looked at them. I had her help me out with that, and it's like, all right, we like this one. So then he did it, and it looks awesome. I can't. I got nothing but love for that first one, partly because it's my first book, but also I love that. I love that imagery in it. It's a horse. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. A horse plays a big role in these books. The horse that big Kalen rides, uh, that horse plays a big role. There's some cool stuff about that horse. He's not just a normal horse. I'll say that. So if anyone's listening,
Mm.
if you like horses, there's some cool stuff with that horse uh, that plays a big role in all of this. But anyway, so that's how I got started. The second one, that was different. Now, at this point, I was like, all right, I kind of, all right, Alan, I got some. So I sent him scenes from the book and said, hey, what do you think of this? Can you send me a couple thumbnails from these scenes? And there's one scene in particular I had my eye. And so he gave me the thumbnails. We've talked about a little bit more, changed a couple things. I wanted that one. So yeah, so I wanted. I don't. You probably can't tell too much in this, but I wanted to have a winter scene. I've always been a sucker for winter scenes. I
Mm.
played World of Warcraft. When I used to play World of Warcraft all the time, some of the dwarven scenes in the winter, I loved
Oh,
them.
yeah.
So I wanted something kind of a winter scene, but I also needed to have both of the two main characters and the horse. This is like three main characters in this. I wanted all three of them. I also wanted them looking down the alley. There's a scene there that something, there's something down this alley, and there's something there away that they're not sure what is, but they something was sending a chill down their spine, basically saying, "Oh, something's up." So that's why I've got the two of them kind of in the house. I wanted a little bit of an action scene.
Yeah, yeah.
So very different, but similar to the first book. Different just in the fact that it was much more of an action scene and much more tighter on them. The first one was very big and broad,
Yeah.
very scenic. Um, what I'm gonna do for the third one, I got a few ideas already. I'm not gonna give it away because I haven't figured that out. But I've already got a couple of ideas. I got to get with Alan pretty soon, hopefully. So that's it. Alan Morris, great guy, great
Yeah,
artist.
amazing.
Love his work, and you know, get the next couple books with him too. So,
That's awesome. Well, we'll end with this last question here. Do you have any current promos, news, updates, or current projects you can share with us?
well, I'm working on book three. It's taking me a little longer. Life, like I said earlier, life gets in the way. I am trying to
Oh,
do
that
this
feeling.
full time. I'm like the starving artist. Luckily, I'm in a position I can get away with that. And my wife has been incredibly gracious about all that. So I am writing full time, but this last year, just some stuff has come up and it's slowed me down. But I'm back in the saddle now, so pounding away at that keyboard, really hustling and getting it going. When is it going to be out? I was going to say at the end of this year, but December is not the best time for me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I found that self publishing. I don't think December's. I don't know. Maybe other people do, but I don't think December's the best time.
Yeah, it tends to be like a drought.
Yeah, especially for self-publishing, I think it's
Yeah.
worse, because we're not in all the stores, so it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like, they're going to go pick up my book and give it away as Christmas presents. It'd be different for like Sanderson or somebody else.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that might be a good time. I don't know. That's a business part of it. I'm still learning. I don't know. But for me, I don't think it's going to be the best of time. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be January, February. I should have the third
Oh,
book
cool.
out. And then hopefully at the end of the year, end of next year, hopefully I'll do a two release. Hopefully I'll be able to get through
Oh,
the fourth
cool.
book um, and get that out, maybe October, November. Hopefully, that's the game plan. I want to get this four books out there so then I can really start advertising and marketing all four of them out there. Um,
That'd be cool.
my business thing is I think once you get three or four books out there as a self publisher, you can start to make money.
Yeah, yeah. It always
They
takes at least 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think. I mean, because I follow a lot of the other guys. I follow all those guys, the ones that are making it. Yeah, Rosal. I think you actually did a thing with him, didn't you? JDL.
Yep. Yep.
Didn't
Yep.
you interview him?
Yep. Yep.
Um, I follow a lot of these guys, and it seems to be some they make it big right off their first book. Some do that. Some can instantly full take off. But it just seems so many of them. I follow this Lori Holmes and her husband. Uh, can't remember his name. He does all the marketing for her, and I follow a lot of his stuff. So I don't want to bore everybody else with all the business side of it. If you want to know more, anybody can reach out to me anytime. Feel free to find me on Facebook or email me, and I can go on and on about the business side of it. A lot of self-publishing people don't like it. I enjoy that part of it too. I enjoy the marketing, advertising. I enjoy trying to figure all that out. But as for where we are now, where I'm at now is in the middle of writing the third book. Then I've got to get my beta readers to read it, give me their feedback on it. And then of course, you got to get editors, get the the cover all done. So that's where we're at. So hopefully very early next year, January, February timeframe, I should have the third book out there. And then I'm planning to get the fourth one turned around pretty quick. So
Well,
that's
cool.
where
Well,
we're
that
at.
sounds awesome. I really look forward to seeing, book 3 and book 4. Everybody, just as a reminder, you can find Michael's social links and social media and book links in the description everywhere where this podcast is found. We just want to remind people to make sure you are reviewing your books, please and thank you, particularly for indie authors. That way, people see them, helps out everybody. And it just takes a couple of moments, whether you're on Kindle or Goodreads. Technology makes it really easy. But Michael, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed, having you on and talking some epic fantasy and about your books. And if there's anything I can do, in the meantime to help you out before this, season and episode drops, just let me know. And other than that, I look forward to talking on social media, my friend.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. You have a good rest of the day, and I will talk to you soon.
You too. Take it easy.
Bye.